Welcome back to what is surely starting to become the Echo Podcast. This is day 4 of reviewing every episode of the Echo miniseries on Disney Plus and also on Hulu. But Hulu has commercials, unless you're going to pay extra money for the non-commercial version, in which just get a different streaming service. You know what I mean? Like, who has the time or the money, to just spend on something that shouldn't even be included in the first place? I don't want commercials on my streaming service. That's why I have a streaming service, so I don't have to watch commercials. Enough of that. I watched this on Disney Plus, so no commercials. Episode 4. Before we get too far into things, though, when I sat down here to record tonight's episode, I walked into the studio, and the studio is not currently in disarray, but for me it is. I often pre-order my Omnis, and when that happens, sometimes they ship on time, and sometimes they don't, and sometimes I forget, so it doesn't even matter. And so I end up with an influx of new books. And the thing of it is, everyone has their own way of sorting out their books, right? Everyone has their own way of organizing their shelves and finding and making room for books. It's a tricky thing to do. There is no right or wrong way. Everyone has their own way of logging and cataloging their books. For me, I like to do mostly alphabetical, except for where it just makes sense. For example, I have World of Wakanda Omnibus with the other Black Panther books, and I have Marvel Knights right in there with Daredevil, because it's a Daredevil book. So little things like that. But what I'm getting at is, because of all the new books I've gotten over the past few weeks, and I think I may still have some more on the way, I don't have them currently organized. And so I just kind of have books strewn about until I find the energy or the dedicated time to just go through and resort all of these books. Because it's not just as simple as putting a book on a shelf. If you're trying to organize it in alphabetical order, you have to literally move like half of your collection just to fit this one book on the shelf, and everything gets moved a few inches to the right. You know what I mean? First world problems at its finest. First world nerd problems at its finest. But as I also sat down here, that was one thing I noticed, was that, man, I have too many books strewn about, but I have to wait until I get the rest of my books in before I start reshelving the bookcases. Otherwise, I'm just wasting my time. But also, I still had my laptop in front of the soundboard from where I had updated yesterday's episode, Echo episode 3. And as I was, sitting there in front of my laptop, it's a gaming laptop, I was like, man, I could review Echo episode 4, or I could play Baldur's Gate 3 for the umpteenth time. Greater thoughts prevailed, and here I am discussing Echo episode 4. There's always plenty of time to play Baldur's Gate. I say that, but there's really not. There is a limited amount of time, but still. I really want to discuss these last couple of episodes here of Echo. I'm looking forward to it. I think it should be. I think it's going to be a fun time. But also, really quick, speaking of video games, the Suicide Squad game is right around the corner, and I don't think I've seen a colder release for a high-profile AAA video game. This game is being put out by Rocksteady. Rocksteady is the same studios that made the Batman Arkham games, so Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, they didn't make Arkham Origins, but they made Arkham Knight. So they made like those trilogy of Batman games that are highly considered to be among the best superhero video games of all time. I mean, it's to the point where, the latest entry, which was Arkham Knight, came out back in, I think, 2015, so like 9 years ago. And people debate about whether or not the Insomniac Spider-Man games can hold up to to the Arkham games, and the most recent one of those came out 9 years ago. That's just how good those games are. They make you feel like Batman. They have very unique scenarios, varying gameplay mechanics, and you can play the stealth Batman, the fucking brute Batman. Like there's so many different ways you can approach those games, and the immersion factor with them telling their own unique story is chef's kiss. I love it, as well as millions of other people. So millions of other people were also really excited when we heard that there was going to be a Suicide Squad game. And we got the lineup. It is a very varied lineup. And I dug it. I dug the premise. Brainiac is controlling the Justice League and is going to be up to the Suicide Squad to stop the Justice League and to ultimately stop Brainiac. And the four playable characters being Harley Quinn, King Shark, Deadshot, and Captain Boomerang. I actually really like that lineup. I think it's a mixture between some of the most well-known characters in the Suicide Squad and some of the most versatile characters as well. You, in theory, would get a little bit of everything by selecting those four as the primary members of the squad. But as time drew nearer to the release date for that video game, we got more and more information, more and more footage, and the interest in that game absolutely plummeted to the point where I feel kind of bad for Rocksteady. The two lead directors of Rocksteady actually departed Rocksteady Studios when this game was very early into its development. Now, we don't know exactly the details as to why, but we do know that apparently they have gone elsewhere and they're going to begin working on some other titles here. But man, you have to really worry about that. It's so easy for video game players to fall in love with a company, but when the people behind that company leave, it's just a shell of its former self. So this Suicide Squad game, it could surprise me and it could be good, but it just looks like a mindless shooter where you shoot the purple things and you collect the purple orbs and you jump around and bounce around. It just doesn't look like a good time. It looks like something that is made strictly for monetization. It's one of those live service type games, like a Destiny or an Anthem or a Division that's supposed to keep you playing for, years and years to come while they monetarily milk you for all you're worth. So it's one of those type games. Those games have never really clicked with me. They just seem so dead behind the eyes. There's zero immersion for me in those games, and the gameplay loop is just excruciating. There's such a boring grind to those games. And don't get me wrong, if you enjoy them, by all means, try this game out. But this may be the first superhero video game in a long time that I just outright blankly skip. And I played the Avengers game that came out a few years ago, which was also a live service game. Also, I played Gotham Knights, so like I'm just, it used to be where, man, even if superhero TV shows or movies let me down, the video games would be strong. But now there's been a few of those that hadn't really quite hit. But I mean, they're kind of hit and miss, I guess. Anyway, I have waxed poetically enough about superhero video games. I know why you guys are here. You guys want to hear about some Echo, episode 4, and I am here to talk about it. I can't delay it any longer, so we'll go ahead and get right into it. But of course, proper introductions are necessary. Homies, one and all, welcome back to another very special episode of the Superhero Homies podcast. My name is Quentin, and today I will be discussing episode 4 of Echo, titled Taloa. Taloa to you too. And let's go ahead and get into the nitty gritty of this episode here. By the way, I forgot to give my score for episode 3 review. I actually scored that one the same score that I gave to episode 2, which is a 5.5. There were parts of episode 3 that I think were certainly better than episode 2, But episode 2, if nothing else, was consistent, right? Whereas episode 3, it may have had one or two cool moments, but they were also just way more canaverous, like trenches that episode just fell into. Way more pit holes from like a storytelling standpoint that episode 3 just kind of plummeted into and it can never really find its way out of. So it kind of evens itself out with episode 2 for me. So yeah, those weren't great. The good news is I do think that episode 4 is better. Now, how much better we'll get into here right about now. So it starts off with a cold open, and it takes us back to 2008, and we see little Maya leaving what looks to be like a private school, and she stops at a ice cream vendor. And by the way, Wilson Fisk, his vehicle is parked, basically feet away from the school and from this ice cream vendor. This guy has like one of those stalls, and Maya, she gestures to the man what she wants, and the guy is being a dickbag. He's being very mean to this little girl for no reason. Now, I am all for being mean to children, but but to be mean to a child for absolutely no reason, unacceptable. Unacceptable. That child simply wanted ice cream, as most children do, and you didn't have to be a dickhead about it, sir. And I think he realized that too, because moments thereafter, when little Maya gets into the vehicle with her good old Uncle Kingpin, and she's pouting and a little sad, that is enough to send Kingpin into a tizzy. And so he calmly tells Maya to stay in the car. He'll be right back. And he goes and beats the ever-living dog shit out of this ice cream vendor. He beat all the Sonic coins out of this motherfucker. Like, there was nothing left of this man. Head, face, body. He was just fucking demolished. I mean, goddamn, man. Like, the thing about the bad luck that this ice cream vendor had, he could have served ice cream to 99 other little kids, and maybe in this one instant he was having like a bad day, right? So like maybe he was nice to all the other kids, and then he got a phone call from his wife that she's leaving him for the pool guy, and she's even taking the dog. And so now this poor guy is just having a fucking terrible day, and Maya comes up to him right after he gets the news, and then he just happens to take out his anger on this poor little kid. That would be terrible, right? I mean, shit. That could be the case. He could have just had a bad day and picked the wrong kid to be a dickhead to. He did. All right, he definitely did. Goddamn. And little Maya, actually, when Kingpin is done with his handiwork, he looks up and he sees Maya standing there at the end of the alleyway, and we can assume that she saw most of that ass whooping that poor guy got. And Fisk tries to tell her, hey, look, it's okay, everything's going to be fine. And little Maya runs up and starts beating the shit out of this guy, too. I think he was already dead at that point. But, yeah, Maya starts kicking this guy's ass, too. This has been my favorite cold open that this show has done so far. I thought that this was so much better than all the other ones. This was better than This is better than the girl who becomes a fucking badass cowgirl shooter and beats up all the bad guys. This is better than the girl who fucking becomes an all-star football player and she beats the giant football player from the other team. This was better than even the episode 1 cold open, which I thought was very intriguing and very mysterious. I didn't really know where it was going at the time, but I even thought that this cold open was better than that, and it's simply because this actually gives us relevant information. You know what I mean? Like those other cold opens, I get what they're trying to do, but it really doesn't amount to anything, right? But this cold open here actually does. Like it tells us so much without telling us much of anything, and I think that part is incredible. So we see her relationship with the Kingpin and how Kingpin, in his own twisted way, does actually have strong feelings for this little girl. He does look at her in like a fatherly manner. She calls him uncle even. You know, we see that like he doesn't like for anyone in any way to mistreat this girl. Right? There were a million other ways he could have handled the situation with the ice cream vendor, but he chose violence. I mean, as he tends to do. And on top of that, we also get the really subtle information here, seeing Maya not being freaked out by what the Kingpin is doing, but she even joins in on the ass kicking. And like that, I thought was just so, maybe cool is the wrong word, but it was so fascinating to see, right? Because we see the influence that the Kingpin is having on Maya, even from a young age. How that maybe Kingpin more than anything is making her so prone to violence at such a young age. She's seeing how he solves this problem, and then she jumps in too because she views the Kingpin as being like one of her heroes and mentors. And again, they showed us instead of just blatantly telling us. Don't get me wrong, they do tell us again later on in the episode here in just a few scenes, but this cold open was some of the best piece of character work that this show has done yet. I kind of wish that more of the show had this. And don't get me wrong, it's not just because we get to see Vincent D'Onofrio really be Kingpin. It's not just that, right? Like they could have done this even with Maya's dad. I think it would have been I think also would have been interesting to see more about her dad before he was killed. Because, I mean, as it stands, according to the TV show, right, we can make certain assumptions about his character or his nature, but at the end of the day, we really don't know a whole lot about him. We don't know exactly what kind of father he was to Maya. We don't know, like, we know that he was a criminal, but was he like really like a dick bag criminal, or was he like Matt Murdock's dad, who was also a criminal who got tied up in the wrong mob ties and he died because of it? Like, battling Jack Murdock did some shady shit, but at the end of the day, he was still a pretty good guy. Was Maya's dad like that too? We don't really know. At least not as of episode 4. They technically still have one more episode if they so choose to display the nature of Maya's dad. But, just speaking of Maya's family, I think that's kind of one issue that this show is suffering from, is that we just don't know anything about her family. Not really. They made such a big deal about her relationship with Bonnie, which I still think was incredibly weird. And she's not even in this episode. So is Bonnie a big deal or not? Because I can't tell, according to this show, how we're supposed to feel about Bonnie. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, man. They're not really connecting all the dots here, and you can tell that there was probably a lot more that was filmed for this show, but for whatever reason, they decided to trim the fat and maybe trim some of the meat accidentally and just streamline this 5 episodes. It is also telling that they released the entire series at one time instead of doing it episodically on a weekly basis. Don't get me wrong, for consumers, most consumers prefer to receive their streaming content all at one time. You look at Stranger Things, like those previous seasons, we get the entire thing in one sitting. Like the same thing with The Witcher or anything else that was really on Netflix. You get it all in one go and you can watch it at your own pace. But the reason why the Disney model I thought was so smart, and same thing with Amazon and HBO Max, was you release it weekly. That's going to drive the consumer base to come back on a weekly basis, thus driving up your numbers. But that only works if your product is good, which leads me to believe that maybe Marvel Disney knew that Echo was not the hit that they were hoping for. And if they drop it all at one time, trim the fat down to 5 episodes, they can just go ahead, bite the bullet, and get it over with. I think that's maybe what they were going for here. because I don't understand why, if they were really confident in this show, I mean, for fuck's sake, they release She-Hulk on a weekly basis, and you can't do that for Echo? I mean, it's not like you guys have a whole lot else going on this year, so why not try to draw it out and bring back a consumer base on a 5-week basis? I don't know. I just think that that they maybe weren't as confident in this show, and I mean, so far I can't say that I blame them. It may have been the best tactic for them to do. But like I said, this episode is not nearly as bad as the previous two. Anyways, yeah. So after little Maya, she jumps off the dumpster and hits the dead ice cream man with a Macho Man elbow drop, and you know, yeah. But anyway, that's the end of that cold open. It was excellent cold open. I really dug that. Told us a lot of information about Maya and Kingpin. We go now to 2021, which, holy shit, that's 3 years ago. Time needs to really chill the fuck out. All right. And we have this sit down dinner again with Maya and Kingpin. And if you guys remember episode 1, there was always this interpreter who was there with Maya and Kingpin. And it's always been the same interpreter, and she would be the go-between, basically, so she would translate from Fisk to Maya, and then from Maya to Fisk, so forth and so on. And I remember thinking in episode 1, man, I hope that Fisk can trust this person. Like, she's got to be like a Wesley level consultant. For those who don't remember, again, Wesley was like the Kingpin's right-hand man in both the comic books and season 1 of the Daredevil TV show. Yeah, so I was like, she's got to be like a Wesley level confidant for Kingpin to entrust her with all of the discussions that he and Maya are having, because she's needed. And so he and Maya are having dinner, and the interpreter is interpreting. And Fisk says to Maya that he basically says this is the kind of like the end of the road, so to speak. And Maya's like, what do you mean? And he says to her, well, we're still going to have our Sunday dinners or whatnot. But basically he was saying that training is over, and now the theoretical is becoming the literal. He says something to that extent. In other words, he's saying that she's going to put everything she learned from the Kingpin into practice. And that's basically, I believe, him saying that we're going to get to see her really do work for him now. Like, she is now going to be one of his fucking agents. At least that's what I took from that. She's going to start doing some of that Kingpin dirty work, some of that muscle that he needs. I'm going to hold that thought until I finish this scene here. And then he goes on to tell Maya that they're the only ones that they can trust. In other words, Fisk can only trust Maya, and Maya can only trust Fisk. And then he tells the interpreter that he says, you may go now. And the interpreter is leaving. I think 1 or 2 of Fisk's goons follow her. They go off screen. We hear the interpreter scream, and then like a gunshot. And wow. I thought, again, awesome scene. Awesome scene. Because it goes to show that at least with some of the Kingpin stuff here, the show is not as incompetent as it is with other aspects of it. Because a few small nitpicky questions were answered, like, wow, Kingpin never really bothered to learn ASL. And because of that, he has to rely on this interpreter. And that's putting a lot of trust, because he's saying a lot of private information to this person. But, we reached the point now where Kingpin feels like they no longer need that interpreter. And it's also because they're about to get into some really shady and illegal shit now with Maya. And he doesn't need that interpreter being any kind of potential risk. So he has her killed. Very Kingpin move to do. Uses you till he doesn't need you anymore. And And again, I think that that kind of subtle storytelling is just so much what this show needed. Because we're going to get into it later on here, but Maya doesn't really understand that. She doesn't understand the correlation there. Kingpin used that interpreter, presumably for years. And as soon as they reached a point where it was too risky to keep her around, where Fisk didn't feel like he needed her anymore, where the risk outweighed the potential reward, he had that person killed. And would that person have snitched? We don't know. But Fisk wasn't gonna give her the chance to snitch. So didn't even matter. And Maya, at this point in the series, she can't seem to see that Fisk would do the same thing to her. She doesn't know that if push came to shove, there could come a time where she outserves her usefulness, and that'd be it. Hell, what Ronan Hawkeye said to her at the end of the Hawkeye TV series was something similar happened to her father, like how Fisk had her father killed, basically because he had done what? He outserved his usefulness. Wasn't as productive anymore. Didn't need him. Get rid of him. Couldn't rely on him. So Fisk has this reoccurring theme about him where he will use you until you are no longer needed. He will wine and dine you, and he will listen to you, and he will make you feel powerful until he no longer needs you. That is great storytelling. Really good stuff. And so at this point in the episode, I was really hopeful that they could kind of keep that up. And it's almost like they have a different writer for the Kingpin stuff than they do for the rest of the content, just because most of his stuff is so good. And it's really not until we hit the modern day, like the 2020, or I guess, I don't know if they give us a date or not, but it's not until we hit like this current day stuff that the Kingpin stuff starts to feel like it's on shaky knees for me. So yeah, we'll get into it. The interpreter, she's killed, and that's supposed to be the beginning of like a new era for Fisk and Maya. I also wish that we had the opportunity to see some of the dirt that Maya had done for Kingpin, because so far the only thing that we really see is in episode 1 where she has her first assignment and she's nervous and she goes in with the 2 Kingpin goons, and then also Daredevil shows up. That's really the only time we actually see her do a straight up job for the Kingpin. You could argue that maybe we see her do some work for the Kingpin in the Hawkeye TV show, but this ain't Hawkeye, this is Echo. And for a show that does so much focus and legwork on her origin and on her background, it would have been cool to see more of Maya's past kind of come up to haunt her again. Because she did a lot of dirty, shady shit. She murders a lot of people. You know what I mean? And it's interesting how the show isn't really fully ready to commit to the idea that Maya was a cold-blooded killer. And I bet that's okay. That's the whole idea of an anti-hero. But I don't know if this show understands that Maya is supposed to be an anti-hero. I don't know what they want us to take from this character ultimately. I feel that she is growing weaker and weaker as the series goes on, not in a physical sense, but in a character progression sense. I don't really believe in this character anymore because I don't think that the show really knows what it wants to do with her, which is unfortunate because she's obviously the lead. So we go to present day again, and as you guys remember, where episode 3 ended was Fisk showing up at Maya's home, and he looked at her, and she looked at him, and then he looked at her, and then she looked at him. And anyway, the first thing that happens here is that some goons pop out of nowhere, grab Maya, and then they force her eye open, And they do a cool little red herring here because you think that Fisk is gonna just take her eye out, an eye for an eye. I knew that was gonna happen for several reasons. One, because canonically speaking, Maya doesn't lose an eye, and two, she's the lead, and then three, Fisk would never do eye for an eye. If you take his eye, he's gonna take your whole fucking head and your family's head. So equality is not really Fisk's thing. But instead, he put some kind of special Tony Stark-esque contact lens into her eye. And no, Tony Stark didn't make this, but he could if he were alive. He did. But the contact is basically an American Sign Language contact, a good old ASL contact lens. And what it does is that I guess Fisk has something of an equivalent on his dead eye, but it allows them to communicate without the need of an interpreter. So I think that's pretty cool technology. I could see like practical applications for that if that were real. Don't get me wrong. It's I think it's always going to be better to just learn sign language if you really want to communicate with people who rely on that for communication. However, if you find yourself in a position where you need to talk to someone who signs, then yeah, maybe that would be a very cool way to actually go about doing it. Anyways, Fisk isn't a good person, so I mean, what are we talking about? Yeah, so they use that to communicate, and Fisk, he wants to have dinner with Maya like they used to. So they go inside and they sit down, and we see them pull out the utensils. Maya pours an expensive bottle of wine down the drain. That kind of hurt my soul because, man, Fisk does have good taste in wine. Like, the man knows his spirits. Anywho, at the dinner table, one of them accidentally drops a knife on the floor, and then there's this moment where neither one of them really trusts the other, you can tell, to retrieve the knife, but Fisk gets the knife first, and then he hands it to Maya as a sign of good faith. I would say they have dinner, but they don't. I don't know what the need was for that knife. Maya pops open a can of Dr. Thunder or something of the equivalent. And Fisk pulls out like a box of fancy looking cookies. I forget what they were called, but apparently those are always Maya's favorites. And then they proceed to not have dinner at all. And instead they discuss why Fisk is there. And listen, Fisk has reach, so I completely understand how this man could know that she wanted to be the queen pin. I don't know who could have told him that, but you know what? He's got reach. He's the kingpin. He's got eyes and ears everywhere. So sure, I'll bite. But yeah, he said that he knows that she wants an empire, and he's willing to give that to her. And he wants her to come back to New York with him. He does this whole song and dance, this whole rigmarole of him saying that he doesn't blame Maya for what she did. He likes that tenacity in her because he would have done the same thing had he suspected someone had betrayed him. And so he's doing this whole thing where he's saying that he respects that decision, blah, 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 and he likes that. This is where the show loses me with the Kingpin stuff. Vanessa herself could not get away with that. There's no way that Maya could get away with that. I guess another discussion we need to have, maybe this isn't the right place for it, but let me just introduce the premise of the discussion. Now that the Daredevil TV show is canon to the MCU, that, by all technical accounts, means that Maya existed during the days of the Daredevil TV show. And we never once see her or hear mention of her. And now again, Kingpin is very resourceful, very private. He wouldn't let something like that be known. But again, hear me out. There's a very, very good reporter and pretty necessary Daredevil side character who is in Daredevil season 1, Ben Urich. He's an extremely good journalist, really good. And he is in season 1, and he digs dirt on Kingpin, and he finds out about Kingpin's mother. He goes and visits her, and Kingpin kills Ben Urich for doing so. If Kingpin had a kid, Ben Urich would have found out too. Or if he had a surrogate daughter or niece that he would watch or attend to, Ben Urich definitely would have found out. And he would have found the connection. And he would have found out about her dad. And he would have found out about her dad's shady dealings. Because that's what Ben Urich does. However, I say all that just to say that sometimes when you retroactively make things canon, you create these real little kind of loopholes that you have to kind of fill in, kind of like these little plot gaps that you have to smooth over. And some things you just kind of have to ignore. Anyways, different conversation for a different time. Just wanted to bring that up really quick about the fact that Maya would exist in the Daredevil TV series as a child, or at least as a younger woman. So, yeah, my issue here, like I was saying about the whole Vanessa thing, and I hate to be that guy. No, I don't. Fuck it. This is a comic book podcast. I love to be that guy. Even in the comic books, right? There have been times where like Vanessa has sinned against Kingpin. But Vanessa, she's incredibly smart and incredibly clever. And the times that she struck out against Kingpin has been when he was at his lowest and all the chips were in her favor. And so she uses her resources, the Kingpin's resources, to kind of take everything from him. I think we actually see that during like the Brian Michael Bendis Daredevil run. But I say all that just to say that in most cases, Vanessa is smart enough to know you don't strike the Kingpin unless you know for certainty that that motherfucker is done. D-U-N, done. And if she had ever done such a thing to Kingpin, she's dead. And there is no coming back for Vanessa. She would be fucking gonzo. She'd be fucking 6 feet deep somewhere in like the middle of the Appalachia. Like they would never find this woman if Kingpin so desired. And that's exactly what he would desire if she ever betrayed him. Don't get it twisted. This is a betrayal. Now, there's still one episode to go here, so I'm not fully off the Kingpin bandwagon because I don't know for certain if Kingpin really means the bullshit that he's spewing right now or if he's just trying to set Maya up. But I gotta be honest, it seems incredibly likely that this TV show wants us to believe that Kingpin is being sincere when he says that he likes Maya's tenacity and that he would have done the same thing. And he doesn't mind that she shot him in the face and he wants her to rule beside him like father and daughter or uncle and niece, whatever. That if they're trying to sell us on that story, they've completely jumped the fucking shark on Kingpin. Character integrity, that is superhero homie rule number 1 for a fucking reason. And this show is losing it in spades. They have one more episode to play the reveal card where Kingpin was playing some kind of 4D chess with Maya and he was setting her up. If they can do that, then that would help redeem some of the Kingpin stuff that they've really dropped the ball on in this series. Because, it doesn't make any sense why Kingpin would let this girl live. No sense. All right, so moving on here. Maya goes to the skating rink to talk to Henry. And Henry tries immediately to talk her out of the whole Queenpin angle. This may be the best bit of dialogue we've gotten from Henry. I think Henry has, for the most part, been kind of a useless dolt. And he wasn't written to be so, but that's just how he comes across. Well, scratch that. He wasn't intentionally written to be a useless dolt, but that's how they wrote him. But this is probably his best moment. He tries to tell Maya that don't do this, don't be the queen pin, basically. And Maya says to him, "I can do it." And Henry's response is, "I know, that's what scares me." Again, there are bright moments in this episode, and again, that was one of them. That was a very nice moment, and it really showcased that he's not worried that Maya can't handle herself. He's worried that she's gonna fall into those footsteps of the Kingpin, and that she's just gonna end up being like him. And then we also find out that, okay, in a way, Henry was trapped in Kingpin's snare, which is why I guess he does work with Fisk shipping or whatever. That had me confused a few episodes ago, and I wasn't quite sure why. Henry was hanging around the Fisk shipping containers or whatnot. I thought for sure this guy would be some kind of snake, maybe, but I guess not. He just got roped into it in a somewhat similar fashion to Maya's dad. Anyway, it's a brief scene, but it's effective. I like it. The next notable scene here is Chula, who is the grandmother of Maya. She is at some kind of marketplace, and she stares off into the distance with that 1,000-yard stare, and she has some kind of vision of the previous women of the Chatwa tribe that we saw in the cold opens for the previous episode. So, like, what's the name? Chafa and Loak, and maybe even Tuklo. I don't know. But she sees like visions of those women from the previous episodes, cold openings. And in the meanwhile, we also see Maya, who is still with Henry, and she kind of goes into like this weird comatose trance nap thing. So this show really is kind of leaning into like the woo woo aspects. And again, I think my biggest issue is with this is not only does it not fit with the comics, but it tonally doesn't fit this show either. And don't get me wrong, like I don't say that as any kind of disrespect to any kind of Native American culture, not at all. But what I'm saying is that for the story they're telling here, it doesn't fit like with this kind of grounded take on the character Echo. It just, I don't know. It doesn't really gel together. It doesn't feel smooth. It feels so fucking jarring to go from, seeing her having this conversation with Kingpin and having this conversation with Henry to visions of previous superheroic women, and these powers have been passed down, waiting dormantly and to the right moment or whatever. I don't know, man. It just doesn't work. And it's like I've said so many times before, you can tell when Marvel Disney is pulling shit out of their ass because it's so vague and ambiguous and doesn't really make any sense. And this is one of those moments for me. But instead of taking Maya to a hospital, he takes her to Chula instead, because that's what you do when somebody fucking faints. You take them to grandma, not to the hospital. This show, man. Oh, this show. Holy shit, bro. Okay. And so he takes her to Grandma Chula because Henry says that, hey, there's something weird going on and she can help you. Henry, what the fuck, bro? Like, I was just giving you props for actually having good dialogue and for saying shit that makes sense. And now here you are, Maya is fucking fainting in your office, and your dumbass decides to take her to grandma's house instead of taking her to a fucking hospital to get treated or checked. All right, bro, whatever. If this show doesn't care about good storytelling, why should I? Chula and Maya have a conversation that they should have had a long time ago. This has been a long time coming. I wish it was of stronger substance. Instead of really hashing it out and talking really about their differences and where things went so awry for the two of them. Instead, most of the conversation is exposition on Chula's daughter, who was Maya's mother, Taloa, and it's just more shit about healing, connection, superpowers, blah blah blah, talking all around the subject. And at the end of the conversation, like, nothing is really said that outrightly helps Maya in any kind of conceivable way. And so when she leaves, she's just angry and upset, and me as a viewer is just more kind of confused and frustrated, because I was looking forward to those two having a sit down, because it was much needed, but not like this. Like, actually talk about some shit. And they do in parts mention how they broke that bond or whatever, and how Chula didn't really reach out, and she says that she was so angry at Maya's father. It's just a whole thing. So yeah, at the end of the day, this was one of the moments of the show from a dramatic aspect that I was kind of looking forward to the most, that didn't really live up to much of anything for me. It was just more of a way for them to use this scene as a vehicle for exposition for some shit that I really don't care about. All right, moving on. Maya, she goes to where the Kingpin is staying at. He's renting out like a hotel room, like a fancy suite there in town, and he's basically, when they had dinner a few scenes ago, Kingpin told her that, hey, listen, I want you to come back with me, but I'll be leaving in a couple days on my plane, and I'll give you to them to have your decision. He doesn't do it in a threatening manner, basically saying, this is my offer, you can take it or leave it, but I hope you take it. And in the meantime, I'll be staying at such and such place. And Maya goes there, bypasses any kind of security that Kingpin may have with him, goes right into his hotel suite, and raises a gun to the Kingpin. Again. All right. One of my many problems with this show, is that so many things simply happen because the show needs it to. And they don't really bother a lot of the time giving us valid explanations as to why. So like, if this were something that happened only once or twice, then I'd forgive it, right? But over the course of me covering these first 4 episodes, there have been several examples of shit not making any sense that clearly just happens because the plot needs it to happen. Anyways. Yeah, so she just walks right into this room, raises a gun to Kingpin's head, and don't get me wrong, I know that people who will, try to be apologists for this show. There's always an apologist for like a bad movie or TV show. They'll say, well, Kingpin knew that Maya would do this and that she wasn't going to shoot him. He knew that. What? This is the fucking Kingpin. You think he's going to take a fucking risk like that? The fuck out of here. No, stop being stupid. You're being as stupid as the people who wrote this show. Don't do that. Bad. Stop it. Anyways, Maya holds up a gun to Kingpin's head again, head and face area. And in return, Kingpin says, hey, look, I got something I want to give you as a present. And he pulls out a box, and inside that box is a hammer. And he says that this is the hammer he used to free himself, and then he tells the story. If you guys have seen the Daredevil TV show, you know where this hammer comes from. This was the hammer he used to bludgeon his father to death. His father was a pathetic, weak man who used to lay hands upon his mother on several occasions. And one day, Little Fisk had enough. He was probably, 12 years old or so, around that age, and bludgeoned his father to death with the hammer. The sick motherfucker kept the hammer, put it in a box, and he presented it to Maya, and he said, I used this to free myself. So now if you want to, go ahead, free yourself from me. And I'm like, she could have just shot you, bro. Like, this is much worse. Imagine somebody coming to kill you with a gun, and you go, wait. Here's a hammer. Kill me with this instead. Like, what, bro? Yeah. This show is really trying hard to be like deep or even profound, and it's just fucking ridiculous. Um, yeah. So anyway, Maya, she raised the hammer, then she lowers it. She's not gonna do it. Uh, yeah. So she doesn't bludgeon the kingpin to death. And kind of the way that this episode wraps up is the kingpin. He gets on the plane. It's time for him to go back to New York, and he's waiting on Maya. Maya hops on a motorcycle riding to parts unknown. We don't know where she's going yet, but we do know that she loses the trail of the men working for Kingpin that was supposed to be keeping a track on her. So Kingpin is sitting on the plane, anxiously awaiting Maya, hoping that she will join him. And he gets a phone call, presumably from one of his henchmen, and they inform him that they lost Maya's trail, but it doesn't look like she's going to be joining him on the plane. And he has one of his anger fits, one of his temper tantrums on the plane, and that is where the episode ends. This episode, from the beginning of the episode to the start of the credits, was only about 35 minutes. I mean, there's only so many ways I can say this. They left a lot of shit out of this show that they clearly filmed. And I sometimes I think that this show left the wrong shit out, you know? Like, I think that there's some scenes that they film that should have stayed in the TV show. I mean, like, it's only 5 episodes, and it's not even 5 hour long blocks. It's not even 45-minute blocks of television. It is varying degrees of, like, I think episode 1 may have been the longest with like 45 minutes of active television, without the credits. And then from there is anywhere from like 39 minutes to 35, so it's not very long at all. It's not like WandaVision, I believe, it definitely had more episodes, but it had 30-minute blocks, but it was filmed and presented in such a way where you got everything you needed in those 30-minute chunks to keep you coming back for more. I really enjoyed WandaVision up until the end, but I just like the way that was presented more. With this, you can tell it's a bit more sloppy, like they were going for something else, but then they got cold feet because maybe they realized that, okay, if we put out some straight bullshit, the fans aren't going to like it, and we can't afford for more bullshit TV shows or movies. And so it seems like they just tried to string together what they could. But like I said, though, man, as a whole, this episode was way better than episodes 2 and 3. Episodes 2 and 3 were straight dumpster juice, but episode 4 does a much better job. There's unfortunately, like, there's a few bright spots in the middle, but most of the middle chunk of this episode, it just doesn't hit. It's just the whole thing again where shit happens because the plot needs it to, regardless of if it makes sense, and they keep trying to shoehorn in the story about Maya's ancestors bestowing superpowers to her, and what these powers are, we don't fucking know yet. And because they were made up by the MCU, they may never be well defined. Man, listen, it's like I said before. I'm past the point of caring that they're not trying to adapt Echo from the comic books. We knew that when we saw Hawkeye. But what I don't like is that they're not giving us a strong version of this character that they've reimagined, and they absolutely could have. And I hate to play Monday morning quarterback, but man, why didn't you guys show us more of her gaining trust for the Kingpin and of the Kingpin by doing these jobs? Why not show us a more confident, competent version of Maya who's just this hardened fucking killer who knows that she's doing the right thing working for the Kingpin, and then she runs into Daredevil and Daredevil is trying to talk her out of it, you know what I mean? You could have used the cameo, I think, maybe for that. Similar structure but different results, you know what I mean? And then after having us see Maya do this cold blooded shit, you have her come, to the realization that happens at the end of the Hawkeye TV show where she realizes that Kingpin's been playing her, and then she pows him right in the eyeball, right in the eye hole there. And then, she can. Matter of fact, I don't think I would have put the show in Oklahoma. I would have kept it in New York. It's kind of like the opposite for me of Punisher season 2, where I love those first couple of episodes of Punisher season 2 that were not in New York City, but the moment they would go to New York, the show became less interesting. It's the opposite with this Echo TV show, where the stuff in New York is my favorite stuff. But the moment that we go to fucking Oklahoma, this shit becomes a drag that is nonsensical and just doesn't add up. Uh, Yeah, so there's only one episode left, and if I'm being honest, I'm not sure what there is to do. Like what's so yeah, what is there for Maya to do now? Is she gonna? I mean, because she's either gonna join the Kingpin or she's not, and it looks like she's not. So Kingpin, it seems like he's dead set on just letting this woman be, even though she shot him in the fucking face, and I've already expressed my disagreements with their choice of writing for the Kingpin, having him just forgive this woman for trying to murder him and usurp his empire. Yeah, Kingpin will fucking never. It's just one of the biggest offenses that this show has done yet. Um, Again, man, oddly enough, like majority of the flashback stuff works really, really well. It's the modern day stuff that is just, it's not even that it's tedious. You just feel like you're missing stuff. And you feel like they only did one draft for all these scripts. And that first draft is what made it to was what made it to film, but as a whole, this episode is it's okay. I think it's okay. I give it a 7 out of 10. I think that the cold open does it a lot of favors. All the flashback scenes do it a lot of favors. Henry actually saying something that makes sense was a really good moment. Um, and I mean, the scene with Maya and Chula, while I had been looking forward to that sit down, it let me down, but they did kind of touch on some of the topics that they should have. And then we just got this weird exposition about Maya's mother and healing powers and shit. And I'm like, what? How do we get here? So it didn't really land the way that it should have, but again, it could have been worse, I guess. Yeah, so that's why I give episode 4 a 7 out of 10, man. Uh, Mostly good, but man, the bad is still very noticeable. Um, I am very curious to see what episode 5 looks like. Very curious. So we'll see what happens. That's going to be it for this episode, guys. Thank you guys again for listening in. Hopefully you enjoyed this as much as this madman enjoyed rambling about this TV show, yelling and screaming into the abyss. That would be all for now. I will see you guys again very soon for the finale of Echo. But until then, my name is Superhero Homie Q.